for us to do this on a Saturday, but you know, you do what you can with what you're good at. My name is Kate Clark. I'm the director of the Mercer County Historical Society, and today we have Miss Karen Bennett, who's going to be teaching us about cemetery research and tombstone art via her presentation, Rocks of Ages. Karen Bennett is a board-certified genealogist, retired in 2024, and a retired dental hygienist. She is a Mercer County native from the Chat area. Karen has been researching family history for nearly 40 years and is the author of Karen's Chat website. She is a member of several lineage societies, including First and Pioneer Families of Mercer County, and she is also past vice president and trustee of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Karen and her husband, Joe, live in rural Salina and have one son and 2 grandchildren. Today, Karen is presenting Rocks of Ages, cemetery research and tombstone art with a focus on Mercer County. And for those watching us online, feel free to post any questions you might have in the comments. We will ask those at the end of the presentation. Without further ado.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak today on one of my favorite topics. In fact, I like this topic so much that I have a regular Tombstone Tuesday blog on my website. And this one is featuring Bruno Betzel. It's an old one, but you can go back on any of these blogs on the website and look at Tombstone Tuesday or anything else I write about. Now, Mercer County has about 109 cemeteries. And if you haven't already, you should check out the new recorder's website, a portion of her website that features Mercer County cemeteries. This is from that. And she also has the Mercer County Cemetery inscription books. There are 8 of them. They are in digital form. I think 7 of them. The 8th is going to be on there pretty soon. So you could look on the recorder's website to get this information, or if you can still buy these books from the Mercer County chapter of the Genealogy Society. There's 8 volumes. I use them all the time. They were created probably about 1990, and in this case, older is better because some of these tombstones are not readable anymore, and they read them for you. You can also get them, look at them at the library too. So cemeteries are the final resting places of our ancestors and family, our relatives, friends, neighbors, and people who founded and built our communities. You can learn a lot about these people by walking through a cemetery. And there are several types of cemeteries. The oldest type cemetery in the U.S. is probably the church cemetery. This one happens to be St. Paul Lutheran, Liberty Township. It's in northern Mercer County. It's on Wabash Road. It's the oldest, one of the oldest Protestant churches in the county, and definitely the oldest Lutheran. So the tradition of the church cemeteries began over in Europe, and yes, they buried people under the church floor. And the more status you had, and you want to be closer to the altar. But eventually, there got to be too many people under the church floor, so they spilled out into the cemetery lots. And even in the beginning stages of our country, they were still burying people under the floors in New York City of the New York City churches. St. Gwendolyn and Granville Township, we went over there last week, and as you can see, the cemetery is more toward the back of the church. And now in Europe, years ago, they said that the best place to be buried in the church cemetery was on the east side of the cemetery, because that was going to be the favorite place to view the sun rising on Judgment Day. Now, if you weren't quite that distinguished a person, the southern part of the southern half of the cemetery would be okay. But you did not want to be buried in the northern part, because that was called the devil's domain. And probably more of our, for the paupers, and more of that type of thing in the northern part. So this is our church, Zion Lutheran in Chat. Beyond the mausoleum, this is our church cemetery, beyond the mausoleum, you can see a little brick church clear to the back on the other side. So it's our church cemetery is not right close to the church. There's a little field in between. And the mausoleum actually belongs to the township now. And years ago, we had a metal archway. I think a lot of churches had this wrought iron metal it's beautiful. The arch indicated the passageway to the next life. And this one also gives the cemetery name, of course. And what's interesting is the long pillars there, we actually have those. When they were taken down, they ended up on somebody's farm. And he was nice enough to give us those long wrought iron pillars. We have cut them off, so make kind of an archway, but it's kind of special to have those. This is IC Catholic Cemetery here in Salina. And the first burial there was about 1866. Wilshire Riley acquired 2 acres for burials in 1866 from the Archbishop for $100. And it's been expanded to 8 acres now. Now, a lot of these cemeteries, when you're driving around the countryside, you'll think it's just a country cemetery because there's no church there by it, but there actually used to be churches on a lot of these cemeteries, so they're not a country cemetery. Take, for example, East Bethel. This is on 707, just east of 49, just north of Chat. That's a picture of the church. It's no longer there, but there's an empty lot there. It was a United Brethren church. So many of these, the church just either dissolved or it's no longer there. Duck Creek is north of Chat. It's on 49. The church was a Methodist. It's no longer there. Liberty Chapel is on Tamer Road, east of Chat. You can see the big lot where the church used to be. And I could kick myself because we would drive by this every Sunday on the way to church. And I knew they were going to tear the church down. Did I take a picture of the church? No. Now I wish I had a good picture of it. Fountain Chapel's on Purdy Road. It was a Methodist church. And that last one was a Friends church on Liberty. Tomlinson, up way near the county line, the Van Wert County line. It was Methodist. And there's a lot of old stones there. That's a very old cemetery. 1837 is the oldest stone they have on Find a Grave for that. And that was connected with a Methodist church. Now, country cemeteries, we see all across the country when you're driving, they were associated really with no church. They're just a cemetery for any denomination. They were often placed on a hill, and like this one had the wrought iron. I'm not sure if the wrought iron's even on there anymore. And always like to say the wrought iron was to keep the animals out, not to keep the interred people in. This is also known as Kessler Cemetery. And the only other one I could think of would be Buck Cemetery in Hopewell Township. That's on, that would, as you're heading toward Rockford from here, it would be on Fromm Pike, and the Fromm Pike divides the cemetery in 2. And the oldest tombstone there I found was about 1842. Now, family burial plots are very difficult to find sometimes. This one is along Wabash Road, near the corner of Wabash and Rockford West. Only a few stones remain, and 1860 was the oldest stone. A lot of these just don't even exist anymore because the farmers could have plowed over them, or they could have put buildings on them. So they're difficult. Sometimes they're even back in the middle of a field. Now this one's a little easier to find. Palmer on Palmer Road near Mendon. It's a private cemetery. It's way off the road. This archway is close to the road. And those blocks on either side, they used to have big lions there, and the eyes would glow green at night, they said. But if you look through the archway, you can see way back there, you can see kind of sticking up, you can see the obelisk, and it's a closer view of the cemetery. Then there's like a cement wall all the way around the cemetery. And the oldest tombstone there's about 1838, so that's a pretty old cemetery, but it is a family cemetery. Now, urban cemeteries would be like North Grove. They're often pretty large, and they're run by the city. And the city of Salina took over the possession of North Grove, maintaining it, not the tombstones, just the cemetery, in 2013. North Grove was established about 1864, although there's about 20 tombstones that predate that. And the oldest one is about 1845. So it appears there were burials there before it was established formally in 1864. There's 19 acres there, over 4,500 people interred in this cemetery. And there's an old picture. So they had actually had the wrought iron there too, and the nice little archway. Spring Hill at Fort Recovery, that would be an urban cemetery. The cemeteries are so pretty this time of year with the trees. Now, Memorial Park, this one is Memory Gardens out of Jefferson Township. The Memorial Parks started about 1917 in California. And for a genealogist, there's not a lot of information to gain from them. You don't have the headstones, just mainly birth and death dates. But they're easy to mow. National Cemetery, they're for the honorably discharged military and their families. And there's 119 of those, and this one happens to be Arlington. A garden cemetery. These are beautiful. This was Spring Grove down in Cincinnati, and they had ponds and walkways and little chapels. People would take a lunch there on Sunday afternoon and walk through. Some people even get married in these. There's fraternal cemeteries. This happens to be up at around Convoy. The Oddfellows, as part of the Oddfellows were a fraternal benefit society. As part of their insurance, you would get a burial plot. So they usually would either buy land for a cemetery, or they would buy a portion of an existing cemetery, so that would be your cemetery plot. And Potter's Fields, where the poor, the unknown, the unwanted, or criminals are buried. Oftentimes there's no markers and very scant information on them. And pet cemeteries, remember Garwick's? I'm not sure if they're still in business. I saw Mrs. Garwick passed away, but they did have a little pet cemetery. And it can be hard to maintain a cemetery. It's this one looks good compared to the way it was, but unfortunately you don't know where these tombstones belong. They did the best they could. Gone but not forgotten. So people do not want to be forgotten. They want to be remembered long after their death. So they erected stone monuments to tell us about them for years to come. Cemeteries are where the past becomes alive. Now, it took me a little second to get this. Think about it. You've got your birthday and your death date, but your life, what really happens is that dash in the middle, the little dash between. I thought that was pretty profound. This is out at North Grove. This is the founder of Salina, James Watson Riley. There never lived a better husband, a kinder father, a truer friend. Now you're going to find information on tombstones that possibly you're not going to find anywhere else. Ohio did not start keeping birth or death records until 1867. So if you weren't affiliated with the church and didn't really leave any records behind, this could be the only record. This person died in 1834 of the person's existence. Children that were born and died between the census, you may not know that they existed unless there was a tombstone. And now the older tombstones, on the one on the right, you see it just gives the date they died and the age, and so it leaves it up to you to figure out what their birthday was. As time went on, of course, that changed. We also see relationships on tombstones. Children, the upper right says grandson. On the lower left's got brother and sister. And Isabel Fass, Nee Howell. The Nee means that was her maiden name. Some tombstones give the place of birth. Altdorf, Germany, Rupertshofen, Germany, Puchendorf, Germany. So you never know what you're going to find on a tombstone. They can tell us military service, occupation, religion, organizations they were in. And now with the laser printing, or the laser carving, you can, hobbies, what your farm looked like, all kinds of information. These are actual epitaphs that are on tombstones. And there can be challenges. Sometimes you have to brush up on your German because it's written in a foreign language. And like any document, there can be errors on it. Now, I don't understand why somebody messed up on the spelling of Pancratius Schinnerer, but they spelled both names wrong. It's just pretty, that's an obvious name, right? So when you go to a cemetery, you want to read the stones for one thing, and you might want to take pictures. So but you don't want to do any harm to the tombstones. I remember a time when they thought shaving cream and flour and chalk was all okay to use, and you really should not put anything on them. Maybe spritz some water on. But the easiest, best way to do it is to get there at the right time of day, and so that you've got the sun hitting that tombstone just right. So this same tombstone, you get there at the wrong time of day, you really can't read it. But boy, if you're there when the sun is hitting the right, you can see every little word there. It just really makes it pop. Now the tombstone faced north, so it's never going to have sunlight hitting it. But if you take a mirror, and my trusty assistant was holding a mirror up there, and it reflects the light, and you can really see it. Maybe you don't get the whole thing all at once, you can do it in pieces. And remember those big reflectors you used to put in your car windshields? Those, we had some that looked like silver on the outside, and those reflect well too. And you take a picture, if you're still having trouble, play with your photo program a little bit. Turn it into a negative, and you might be able to read some of the inscription a little bit better. And you can do a tombstone rubbing too. And you can get tombstone rubbing kits, which has paper and the wax, or you could use non-fusible interfacing and use a crayon. But you want to get permission, you want to be careful with the stone, kind of tap it to make sure it's not going to crumble. You don't want to hurt it. And if it's a kind of a fragile stone, kind of support it as you do this. I'll tell you, the sandstone really gives you, they're smooth, they give you a really nice rubbing. That grainy marble, not so much. And some people even frame them and hang them on their walls. So when you go to a cemetery, the photos I like to take a picture of the sign of the cemetery, get kind of an overall view of the cemetery, take a close-up picture, and then take a picture of the people around that stone, because the Stevens, is that how you pronounce that? Bruno Betzel's wife was a Steeman, so that's her parents off to the right, and her brothers to the back. So lots of times people will be buried near family. And to take a picture of the back of the tombstone, there can be information back there. That happens to be my parents' tombstone. So I gave a cemetery talk actually a walk in Minster a few years ago, and as I was kind of casing out the cemetery, they had 2 wooden tombstones there. I'd never seen a wooden tombstone, and of course you couldn't read anything on it. I have no idea how old they would be, but I thought that was pretty fascinating. So the first tombstones would have been wood or field stones. And then came along sandstone, and there's a few around here, not a lot, of that cemetery, Tomlinson up by the Van Wert County line. They have several. Fountain Chapel has some. And like I said, they're real nice and smooth. But I think what often happens is they get little cracks across the top, and then the moisture gets in there and freezing and thawing, and then they just can shear off. And some of these carvers just didn't plan out things very well. They didn't think ahead. This is Sarah M. Jackson. So look at her last name, J.A. Well, I ran out of room. Let's go to the next one. C.K.S.O.M. So you're going to run into that on some of these early tombstones. Now, marble, that was very popular in the mid-1800s. We still see a lot of those. But they are not weathering well at all. The acid rain is really hard on them. So this stone, when it was first placed, it would have had sharp edges, and that writing would have been very clear. But they're kind of proving to be temporary markers. And lots of bad things can happen to them. They're just biological growth, rusting, black algae, lichen, moss. And sometimes I think with that red one up in the top, makes you wonder if somebody tried to clean it maybe with bleach or some muriatic acids at one point, and I don't know, but it's just a very funny color. But the one that's really destroyed on the bottom probably maybe was bleach, because I guess it really infuses into the stone and really breaks it down. So you have to be very careful with those. Now, John and I were talking, has anybody seen a metal marker in Mercer County?
Oh, not in Mercer, but I have seen one.
Yeah, some cemeteries, they're very popular, but we were trying to think if we've ever seen one here in Mercer County.
Well, North Grove specifically,
Yeah,
because we were talking about that the other day.
yeah, and so they're made out of pure zinc. They were formed in panels, molded in panels. You put them together, and they hold up really well. They get this pretty blue patina, and you can see on the one on the right, it's actually holding up better than the base is. And so then you could get these embellishments. So I understand the salesman went around and he had a book, and you picked out what embellishments you wanted, and they put your panels together, and you could put anything on it there. They have military embellishments. They're very pretty. So they, I think it was about 1873, it started in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They had the company. And during World War I then, it became a munitions, that the government took it over, and then they never really came back, so they kind of phased out by 1939. But they really hold up quite well, and that's a very large one over at Walpock. So today, granite is the tombstone material of choice, and they seem to be holding up very well. They're more durable than marble. They don't get the moss and the algae. But I've noticed on some, and even some around here, they're getting this white material. It's kind of hard. This one, we were in Baltic, in Tuscarawas, Coshocton County, and this one's quite bad, and I did notice a couple recently, so I'm not sure what that is forming on these granite tombstones. I'm a little surprised. So about 1908, you could actually buy a tombstone at a pretty reasonable cost from the Sears Roebuck catalog. So, going to talk about tombstone art, the artwork on the tombstones. They did use skulls and crossbones. Our son ran the Boston Marathon in 2009, so while we were there, we took in a lot of cemeteries. These were Puritans that did this. They had a grim view of death. They thought very few people were going to go to heaven. So you lived and you died, and that was it, skull and crossbones. But as they kind of lost their power, you can see up on the upper left, it's still kind of a skull, but you got little wings now. And maybe there is some chance some people could get to heaven. And then you've got the soul effigy, a much softer face, more angelic with the wings. So after that phase, and we get to the 1800s, about 1830s, the willow tree was one of the first and most popular symbols to take over all those skulls and crossbones and winged death heads. The willow is a symbol of mourning, weeping, and the drooping branches symbolize drooping spirits. The urn was also very popular, and this is kind of from an ancient Egyptian belief that if the vital organs were placed in a jar, life would be restored at some point. Obelisk, also Egyptian. They stand for greatness and patriotism. They represent a ray of sunlight, the Egyptian god Ra. And the Egyptians actually put hieroglyphics on the side, and they would, at the top peak, they would put some copper so it would reflect the sunlight. And the one on the left is, we talked about it on the cemetery walk a couple weeks ago, was Struckman, a carriage maker and so on. And then the one on the right is from Greenville Union Cemetery. Now, probably the most common symbolism you're going to see on tombstones is the religious part. Crosses are very, very common, all kinds of crosses. You see different designs, and it's the Christian symbol of salvation. This happens to be over at the Catholic cemetery. This one's loaded with symbolism. You've got the kind of the 3 points of the whole tombstone, which would signify the Trinity, the chalice for Holy Communion, the book, which looks like it's had writing on it at one time that you could read, probably said Holy Bible. 2 roses there that have opened up, which indicates it was like a mature, and it was a woman, a mature woman, and roses would symbolize beauty. There's a heart for love, 2 stars for divine guidance, or they could symbolize the 5 wounds of Christ. Of course, the cross, and then there's an anchor. And the anchor would signify hope. And early Christians, do you see how it looks like a cross almost? Early Christians drew a cross disguised as an anchor to mark and guide their way to secret meetings because they were persecuted. Now, one of the 7 virtues was hope, and that hope is holding onto an anchor too, which also looks like a cross. The archway, the gateway to heaven, and arches indicate triumphant entry, victory, and death. So the entrance to heaven, and then there's the little heavenly city. And the other one says, "In my Father's house are many mansions." And the rocks of ages, clinging to a cross on a turbulent sea. You got the star up there to guide you. Books are popular. Just an open book with no writing, you would probably think that's the book of life. Then the closed book, life has ended. And then there's a hand holding a book, and the embodiment of faith. Angels are messengers between God and man, and if they're looking down or kind of drooping, that would indicate mourning. And if they're ascending, that would indicate the resurrection going to heaven. The one on the left is a child's over here at the Catholic cemetery. And Bill and I were talking about his father was driven out of town. It's a whole other story. Broken column, life has ended, life cut short. The wreath is victory and death. And the palm branches would be a spiritual victory over death. Victory and rejoicing. The palm branches for Palm Sunday. Hands are popular on tombstones. Usually the hands signify marriage. Now if you notice on the little cuff on the left, there's a little bit of lace. That would be the wife, the mother. And then the more of a shirt cuff on the right would be for the man. This is over at North Grove. It's an arch. And it actually says mother and father, and then you see the clasped hands. And this was kind of special because as you look toward the bottom, it has Chickasaw. So I don't know if there was it looks like Lammers, Chickasaw. So I don't know if there was a carver over at Chickasaw, but it looks like his carver's mark. And a lot of finger pointing going on at the cemetery. Soul has gone to heaven. And what have we here? Actually, it's God reaching down for the soul. Not that the person's going to the other place. Now here's one over at Riverside at Rockford. I have no idea. If anybody has any kind of idea what that hand signal means, I would really like to know. But that one has got me stumped. Can't figure that one out. It's for a young girl. She's only about 20 years old. So wheat, it's a symbol for harvest, prosperity, and usually a person lived a long life, probably over 70 years. And ivy is kind of interesting. It's eternally green, even in harsh conditions. So that would be a symbol of immortality. And it clings to things, and which would be a symbol of friendship. And plus it's got the 3 points, which would symbolize the Trinity. And oak leaves, strength, and patriotism. these are half-carved tombstones. It's all half-carved on purpose, which symbolizes the transition from heaven to earth. Now, lots of times children's tombstones are kind of small, they didn't weather well, they break, they're half in the ground. But if you see any of these symbols and can't even read it, you can probably guess that this was a child's tombstone. The lamb, sometimes you'll just see a little lamb, the stone will be so sunken that only the little lamb is on the top. So the lamb and the dove would indicate innocence. And on the lower right, it's a bud broken. Life has been cut short. So that was just a bud. If you recall that one tombstone, I mentioned that the rose was open, it was a mature woman. So they actually use a bud for a child instead of a full-blown rose. And then there's the empty chair, for a little chair for a child. Lots of military markers in the cemetery. The one on the left there for Revolutionary War sure looks like an original marker, and then the one on the right would be have been replaced. Macedon Cemetery in Washington Township, we were just there last weekend, and it's reported that there are two, according to the grave registration cards at the recorder's office, there are two Revolutionary War veterans buried there, James Schoonover and Amos Spencer, but there's no tombstone. But they actually give a lot and a block and a grave number for them too, so it's kind of specific. The cemetery's rough. It's an old cemetery. Now there's supposedly another Revolutionary War veteran buried in Merlin Cemetery south of Minden, Henry Leeser. He was actually from Kentucky. His daughter married a Merlin up around Minden. He was visiting her and he was killed by a falling tree, so the story goes. He was buried on a private farm there. And that picture was from the recorder's website. Now the Fort Recovery Monument is a place probably over 600 Revolutionary War soldiers. Well, no, I take that back. Army soldiers that were killed in 1791 at St. Clair's defeat. Now, surely some of those were probably in the Revolutionary War, but we really don't know. But for sure, two of them, Captain Robert Kirkwood Jr., and he was killed at St. Clair's defeat in 1791, and Staff Officer William McMahon at Anthony Wayne's victory in 1794. So those two are documented as Revolutionary War soldiers buried at that monument. But like I said, there's over 600 other soldiers buried there. So I would almost have to think that there would be a few more for the Revolution, but it would be a lot of work to find out, but somebody might do that. War of 1812, there's a 1812 veteran of a Tomlinson, John Heath. Lots of Civil War veterans buried. A lot from the 71st, which I guess was started in Mercer County, so that makes sense. This is Major James W. Carlin, and he's over at North Grove. He was a major in the 71st, and he made it through the war. He was put in a Confederate camp, survived that. They put him on the Sultana to come home, and he was killed when the ship exploded. And so he is not buried there, but it mentions him. His wife never remarried, but she received a widow's pension. And he is mentioned on there, so they have a flagstaff. So we call this a cenotaph, C-E-N-O-T-A-P-H, cenotaph. It would be an empty grave for him as far as he's concerned. He's buried elsewhere. It would be like maybe soldiers that were killed in the Second World War. They're buried over in France. They're not, then they have a monument for them. It's an empty grave here, but people have a cenotaph. Now there's a Confederate soldier buried over in Elm Grove, and a newly restored monument. I think it was somebody's Eagle Scout project, I think. Okay. And so that's kind of interesting. Now, if you notice, the Union tombstones were more rounded, and the Confederates are pointed, and that was supposedly the Confederates pointed so the damn Yankees could not sit on their grave. Then, if you survived the war, the veterans had their own organization, the Grand Army of the Republic. So these are some things to look for on tombstones that could tell you more about your ancestor, more about people. Spanish-American War, we have one of those veterans in Swamp College in Jefferson Township. That was Dolman Robinson. This is in Van Wert. This was Woodlawn at Ohio City, really nice cemetery there. And we saw several of this type of monument, and we think it's for if they were killed in action. There were at least 3 of these stones at that cemetery at Woodlawn. This is at our cemetery at Zion Lutheran. He was in the balloon company, air service, and found this last week at Spring Hill Fort Recovery. He was a horseshoer in World War I. We thought that was pretty cool. And any time I see some kind of an emblem that I don't know what it is, it drives me nuts. This was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I have to look it up. And that's what that looks like, a little castle out there. So flagstaffs can also help you determine, go left or right on the top, that's Revolutionary War, Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I. Second row is World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian, Vietnam and the Persian Gulf. And just to a shout out for Wreaths Across America, they have a designated Saturday in December where they put out wreaths. I am not a volunteering thing, but I usually order a 2-pack. I order one for my dad's grave, and then I just donate for the second that they can put it on any wreath. But they decorate veterans' grave sites on that designated Saturday. Now, one of my favorite the symbolisms on tombstones are the fraternal societies. These just really, I just love to find these. Of course, you got the Masons going down as the Oddfellows, and the Knights Templar, and that would be in hoc signo vinces and this sign conquer. Freemasons, those are very popular. That was a popular society. These are some associated Mason symbols you might see. The 32nd degree, the Shriner. And then this one, the 33rd degree, I think that is very special. This was Raymond Younger. He was a Grand Master, and that's from over at Northborough over here. I don't think you see too many 33rd degree Masons. Now the Knights Templar, and I guess there are still Knights Templar, but they, in the 1100s, they were Christian warrior monks who protected the Christian pilgrims going to the Holy Land. And the women's branch of the Masons was the Eastern Star, and fairest among thousands, altogether lovely. Now this one really had me stumped, but I finally figured it out. Anybody know what this is? It was an acronym for a Bible verse, John 12:15. And so going around the outside, fear not, daughter of Zion, behold the King cometh. And then the inside is an anagram, the letters for Mary, M-A-R, Mary, and the G is probably for God. Now this was a special degree for the women, a Mason's wife or daughter or mother. If they did something special for the Masons, then they could get this honorary degree. Independent Order of Oddfellows. So maybe you've seen on tombstones these 3 little links. Sometimes they will have the letters in, and sometimes they won't. And the letters don't, that stands for their motto. It's not for the name. It's friendship, love, and truth. And their women's organization was the Daughters of Rebecca. Woodmen of the World when you go through a cemetery and you see these tree stumps, most of them, not all, but most of them are Woodmen of the World, which is also another benefit society, and they had an insurance policy. Early on, you received a tombstone with your policy, and then it got a little expensive, so then they charged you, if you pay a $100 rider, you get the tombstone, and then it got way too expensive, and they eliminated that altogether probably about 1930. So they had different types. That's the logs kind of stacked up, so just a little different one. Here's another one. Ohio City they must have had a lot of organizations. This comes from Ohio City too. The broken columns, life has ended. There's a lot on that tombstone. The palms, the ivy, but Knights of the Maccabees. And they were kind of a pass-the-hat society, especially if a husband died and the woman, the widow, they would pass the hat for her. But they had their little organizations were called tents. Knights of Pythias, and on their little shield stood for friendship, charity, and benevolence. And then the ladies' organization, to the right there, stood for purity, love, equality, and fidelity. They had this cool, I think it's a Wiltshire, that cool flag staff for the Pythians. Pythian sisters. And the Elks. And this one was a real find. This is over at Rockford, at Riverside at Rockford, the Improved Order of Red Man, which is a really old organization about the Revolutionary War time, formed from the Sons of Liberty. It's a very patriotic organization. Knights of Columbus, of course, a Catholic organization. Now, some people, he was into the Masons, the Pythians, and he worked for the railroad. Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. And then on the lower right, also a train, Benefit Association of Railroad Employees. Some organizations we have now, Sons of the American Revolution and Daughters of the American Revolution. We were going through a cemetery in Van Wert, Greenbrier, and Joe happened to notice this little plaque thing that looked like a swivel, and they were ceramic photographs from the probably 1870s. And they still make these today. A lot of people use them on their tombstones. So we have some other types of burials, a mausoleum. This is the Richardson-Bretz one over at North Grove. Mausoleums have been around for a long time. The Taj Mahal was actually a mausoleum, but I don't think they really became popular until Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, died in 1861. And by 1871, she had erected a mausoleum for him. And then by the early 1900s, they became popular over here in the US. This is ours at Chattanooga. It's right by our cemetery, but it was owned by the Chattanooga Mausoleum Association, but all the members died, so the organization was no more. So the township takes care of it now. And that's what it looks like on the inside. It's quite clean. And then clear at the back, that's the mechanism that they raise the caskets into the vaults. And my great-grandparents, probably can't read it, but the Mellers, they are buried there. Now you might think that the coffin and people are buried in the sarcophagus, but they're not. They're all underground, but it's just very ornate on top. But now these are above ground. In down in New Orleans, which they are above sea level, no, they're below sea level. They can't bury people underground. So they don't involve them, they put them in these vaults, and after a year, the body is pretty much decayed to ashes, and they push it all to the back, it falls down, and it can bury somebody else in them. So lots of times families will have their own vault that they do this. So some unusual monuments. This is over at Roberts Cemetery over on Oregon Road, just east of 127. And it's like a little log cabin, and the names of the children are on those little logs there. Then the cool monument, which is beautiful. Now we know how much this costs, thanks to Lee yesterday, who gave me some information. This is over at Woodlawn in Ohio City. It's quite the monument. Out in front of it, they are buried underneath these slabs. But so what Lee gave me yesterday, she died, Mrs. Poole died, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Poole died in 1908, and the estate was $8,000. So he left all that to her. They had no children, and she was to use that, and whatever was left over from the estate, she was to buy, or the estate was, somebody was supposed to buy a tombstone monument. Well, she died in 1920, and by then the estate had grown to $21,000. So they had basically $20,000 to buy this monument. So but the reason I even know this is because some of her family must have been contesting this. They thought that was too much to spend for a monument, that they probably wanted some of this estate money. But probably in 1920, $20,000 was probably a lot. So it's very beautiful. And there's been a lot of urban legends with the kids around that area, because she's holding what the kids would say would be a knife, and it looks like he might be holding a rope, and so the urban legend goes that they were trying to kill each other. But really she's just holding a sheep shear, and he's holding some wheat. This is Rolfe's monument over at the Catholic Cemetery. They have the glass company. Very unique, very pretty. Now, Dixon's had the Pontiac dealership there, and he must have been a character, because this monument is loaded with information. The Revolutionary War, with no heritage, each generation starts anew. And it appears he was in Korea. He's a veteran. God bless America. And I like that. Hey there, don't just look, talk to us. If we hear you, great. If we don't, what you lose. Now this would have been his father's. This would have been a little farther down. The world's largest small-town Pontiac dealer, 401 units, 1941, Salina, Ohio. Now this is the Herbst Monument over in Green Lawn of Wapak. It's quite a monument. And Mr. Herbst always said that when he died, there would be an empty chair, and he made sure there was. And they had to even bring a rail spur in to make this monument. Over in Decatur, they like their semi-trucks. This stone was bought by her son, W.H. Stoner, and paid for him after his sister squandered all her mother's money. How do you think those siblings got along? This is down at Union Cemetery in Greenville, and the name Death, a friend told me they probably pronounce it Death. I don't know, but it looks like Death to me. And then the other one is very unusual. A little bird looking at a little dead bird laying there. This looks like a tree stump, right? It's actually a monument down there. And some people embellish theirs with their favorite pet. Or somebody likes squirrels.
You have to find a chipmunk for you.
So the slot machine is over at Wapak at St. Joe, and I'm not sure where the cards for it, but the piano player is over at North Grove. This is up at Lima, at Green Lawn at Lima, and a pyramid, and supposedly that design is so the devil will not sit on their tombstone, and it's guarded by the Sphinx, etc. This was Greek. The Greeks used to take their lunch, and they would go to the grave site, and they would sit there, and the family would gather and talk, and that's where this is at Wapak. I thought it was quite pretty. And then sometimes you find these sweet little things. This was a little unique tombstone, but it had a little opening in it, and there's a bird's nest in there. This was at Boston, John Hancock. You see the hand with the three chicken, Hancock. Very clever. Revere's tomb. Oh, a casket. It's a cruising casket. I don't think the world's ready for that one. And finally, we're in Evans City, Pennsylvania. It's on the west side of Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh. My cousin lives there. We were visiting her. And we had to go to the cemetery because, do you remember in the movie Night of the Living Dead, the original from 1968, the opening scenes were filmed in the cemetery. So Barbara and her boyfriend had driven up to the cemetery, and she was rushing and to try to get away from the zombies, and this large white tombstone there, she was kind of hiding behind it. And it's the tombstone of Nicholas Kramer, and he was actually in the Pennsylvania infantry in the Civil War. And so when I looked at my pictures when I got home, same cemetery, I didn't really realize that there was a man, somebody was standing back there. We didn't see anybody in the cemetery where the zombies were. And there's a man standing there. And this Evans City is near Mars. So I always like to say, we have driven from Neptune to Mars and back. Remember me as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so must you be. Prepare for death and follow me. And that concludes it. Thank you.
Will you be taking any questions at all?
If anybody has any questions, I
Does anybody have any
can
questions?
answer.
What
Not a
happened
question.
to Palmer?
Oh, what happened to them? Somebody's got them.
I remember.
Somebody wrote me on my blog, and I think they're in somebody's barn or something. But I remember too, that supposedly the eyes glowed dark and green at night. Yeah, you ever see it?
Karen, remember the tale about the glowing light?
Oh yeah, there was supposed to be a glowing light to the west too, but we went out one
Well, you
one
saw
year
it, you
be-
thought it was turned out to be a nightlight.
a nightlight. One year we went all around, it was around Halloween, and to these like Bloody Bridge and the Palmer Cemetery, and trying to dispel these urban legends. And yeah, it was kind of fun, but
Yes, not a question, but a friend recently told me that she couldn't read an old tombstone, so she had taken aluminum foil and pressed it in, and then she was able to read it.
It's actually a good idea.
I've done that with a toothbrush. Yes, I've done that. In
Oh.
fact, I even made a cast of a tombstone. You do the foil like that, you carefully put it in your car, and you take it home, and we kind of reinforced it with
Folded cardboard.
yeah, folded cardboard and something else, and then we poured plaster in there. It's heavy, but we have an actual cast. I do not recommend that project at all. But, yeah. But yes, that will help you read it. Now, I will say that those sandstone ones that are smooth, it's much better. Those pebbly, the marble that is really weathered, you don't get a good rubbing or hair roll at all.
We have chapels in St. Anthony's in the cemetery that they bury people in the wintertime underneath it.
They stored them in there.
They store them.
Oh, because the ground is frozen?
Frozen,
Oh.
At Elm Grove.
and you can walk, they have trap doors and walk underneath it, and it's pretty awesome.
There's steps down, and then there's a hole right in front of like the, where the altar would have been, where they would.
Because we've been in Elm Grove.
Oh, that happens very often.
It's really neat, it's just eerie.
That's a pretty cemetery.
It's just kind of, is there any old cemeteries that have something like that in chapels that?
I don't know.
Not that we're aware of.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not say they know.
I think that my uncle in Dayton, at the big one in Dayton, when he got buried, it was, ground was frozen, they put in one of those, but I don't know all the circumstances after that.
They don't
It was a
know who,
period of time.
the people that stored down there, I don't think, is that right, Beth? They have no idea who was.
I mean, they stored them down there.
Yeah, it's sort of a temporary thing.
Yeah, it was temporary thing to the ground thawed out.
And I guess I didn't mention too about the mausoleums, they're locked, obviously, but most of them will be open on Memorial Day. So if you want to go in a mausoleum, most of the cemeteries around here do open them, and even out in the country, they will open them on Memorial Day.
Any other questions? All right, thank you again for today, and we learned lots.